Hi, and welcome back to my water-type Pokemon adventure! In the last video, I laid out what that all entails, so you can go check that out, but if not, here's a quick rundown. I'm playing through all of the Pokemon games in order using only water-type Pokemon. Pokemon Moon is going to have a different playthrough, but that's for another day. Today, we're going to be talking about my journeys through Pokemon Crystal, Emerald, and Platinum. Since there are a lot to talk about, let's get right into it! I started Pokemon Crystal right after Pokemon Blue, and the upgrades throughout the game were many and much appreciated. The implementation of a real bag menu, the day and night, and real-time systems were really cool, and the addition of color added a lot to build up from the original games. The jump from the first games to these felt like the jump from Super Mario 1 to 3. It's amazing that they were on the same system, but they look super different and are much more robust. Anyway, moving on to my journey. I started with Totodile, of course. Yay, I love this little guy. When I was a kid, I had a shirt that had the Totodile line on it, and I loved how I thought Croconaw looked like a little caveman. The Johto region introduced the Wooper and Chinchou lines, which were incredibly unique, giving water a bit more resistance against electricity, one of their only two weaknesses. I was able to grab Wooper pretty early on, but I would have to wait until pretty late until I could get my hands on Chinchou. I also grabbed a Slowpoke in the Slowpoke well, and here's where I gotta say a thing. In the last video, I mentioned how I had a sort of soft rule for these playthroughs to only use newly introduced water Pokemon, and this is one of the few exceptions I made. I didn't really think about this rule until Gen 3, but I can still make this fit! My final team consisted of Feraligatr, Slowbro, Quagsire, Gyarados, Lapras, and Lantern. For the Gen 1 Pokemon I added to my team, I figured they were okay because they had to do with this new generation of Pokemon games. Gyarados was the introduction to shiny Pokemon, being the red Gyarados you find at Lake of Rage. Lapras is only found in a cave, specifically on Friday, which utilizes the day and night feature. And Slowpoke was part of the story, where Team Rocket were causing trouble in the Slowpoke well, and also Slowpoke Tails as a snack originated in this generation. And that all is good enough for me. For the most part, I didn't really have too much trouble during this playthrough. The most trouble I remember having in the beginning was against a second rival fight in Azalea Town. I remember wanting to go through the Ilex Forest to find some Pokemon, but he kept me from going in there, so I had to suffer a bit against his team. Apart from this, the rest of the game didn't offer much trouble, but it was really fun to play through. Despite playing Crystal when I was a kid, I only beat it fully in Heart Gold, so it was really fun and cool to see how the generation originally was. Since none of my Pokemon could fly, I pretty much had to walk and bike everywhere, but it wasn't much of an issue because the layout of the region was kind of like a circle, so it wasn't like I ever had to go too far to get anywhere. As for the Elite Four, they weren't too much trouble. The only person I needed to worry about was Lance, but his Pokemon are solved with some simple Ice-type moves. Going over to Kanto, it was pretty easy, but boy was Red something else. I only had to grind for a little bit, and I was able to beat his team while my team were only like 10 levels lower, due to my optimal planning and my epic team. I think that's enough for Crystal, so now let's move on to Pokemon Emerald. Pokemon Emerald is probably in the top 3 of my favorite Pokemon games. Again, the jump from the previous gen was incredible, almost perfecting the Pokemon formula as we know it. Notice how I said almost. Anyway, from the art style to the music and sounds to the story, this game is so much fun and iconic, and I've always loved it since I first played it as a kid. Picking Mudkip as my starter, we began our epic adventure through the Hoenn region. Early on, I added Lotad, Wingull, and Marill to my team. Unfortunately, my brain kind of forgets Gen 2 exists in the way it does, and lots of Gen 2 Pokemon are thought of to my brain as either Gen 1 or Gen 3, and that's what happened with Azumarill. Anyway, by the end of the game, we added Carvanha and Spheal, the last of which came in clutch against dragons and whatnot, so my full team was Swampert, Ludicolo, Pelipper, Azumarill, Sharpedo, and Walrein. Lots of great coverage, probably the most I've had so far, giving me a flying type with actual flying type moves to counter those pesky grass types. Going through the gym leaders and stuff this game didn't give me too much trouble, until I got to Watson. I think I probably used my Azumarill's huge power, defense, curl, rollout strats to get through it. I don't really remember. But we got through it, so that's all that matters. Oh yeah, and Marshtomp was also ground type too, so that helped. Hee. Through the game, you are also fighting Team Magma and Team Aqua, the rival organizations who are trying to use the power of the legendary Pokemon to create their ideal worlds. Luckily, they didn't ever really have any Pokemon that would pose a threat to my team, much less Team Magma, so it was just stopping them at every turn whenever we encountered them. Besides that, I just enjoyed my journey through my favorite region, uncovering the secrets behind Team Aqua and Team Magma's plans, discovering the truth of Kyogre, Groudon, and Rayquaza, saving the world, and becoming champion. I know Emerald has the Battle Frontier, but since that's not really part of the main game and doesn't really have an ending, I didn't bother with that at all. Plus, I'm not guaranteed to be able to only use water types, so our adventure ended there. Moving on, the next game in my water type journey was Pokemon Platinum. This is gonna get crazy, so strap in. Right off the bat, I'm gonna say it. I did not have a great time playing Platinum. In fact, it was the first time in my whole playthrough, even after this game up to this point. And no, it wasn't because I just played 3 Pokemon games back to back. After Platinum, I pretty much played White, Black 2, and X all back to back, and I never felt the same tedium or boringness, or I don't know, that I felt while playing Platinum. There's just something about this game that really made it a chore for me to get through. I also don't know why, but there was something about the art style that looked silly to me. It's not my favorite graphics-wise. Anyway, all that is to say that this game is my least favorite Pokemon game. Either way, I was still going to get through it and prove my worth as the best water-type trainer ever. Now that I have made my probably controversial opinions known to the whole world, onto my playthrough. This was the first game in my journey where I truly followed the only using newly introduced Pokemon rule and followed through with it, going forward so far, with one exception, but we'll talk about that later. Starting with Piplup, we soon added Bidoof to our team. And now I know what you're thinking. Bidoof isn't a water-type Pokemon, and that's true. But Bibarel is, and Bidoof evolves pretty early, so I just had to do that before I faced the first gym, which was super easy. The next gym, however, was not easy at all. It was a grass-type gym, super early on, so the only coverage move I really had to work with was Peck and no ice-type attacks. I tried so many times to beat her without just super over-leveling, and it was getting frustrating. I even tried using X items, which is something I never do. Finally, I was able to beat the gym using Defense Curl rollout strats, which would continue to be handy throughout this playthrough. Aside from that, the only other gym leader that gave me trouble was the last gym, which used Electric-type Pokemon, but I was able to get through lots of the team with my Gastrodon. Another goal I wanted to complete in this playthrough was to do the impossible. I was going to beat Cynthia and make it completely no big deal. But not only that, I was going to handedly beat Garchomp. But not only that, you might have noticed that I've neglected to mention my whole team so far, and there's a reason for that. Like I said, I only used newly introduced water-type Pokemon. Therefore, my final team ended up being Empoleon, Bibarel, Gastrodon, Floatzel, Lumineon, and Mantike. Now you might have noticed something a little strange in my team there. Emphasis on little. Mantike is the baby form of Mantine, originally introduced in Gen 2. But this little guy was introduced here in Gen 4. My goal that I just mentioned a little bit ago was that I would beat Cynthia's Garchomp with my Mantike. Only my Mantike. I spent hours creating the perfect Mantike, catching one with a good nature and EV training it to make it the strongest Mantike ever. And after hours of training, I finally did it, showing that Cynthia, despite all the big talk I've heard about her, is super easy and no match for me, the best water-type trainer ever. Also, I just wanted to add that Bibarel came in clutch against Giratina since it was immune to its strong ghost-type attacks. I kind of forgot to mention that while I was writing the script and I just thought about it now. Yay! Anyway, I was finally glad to be done with Pokemon Platinum, becoming the champion in yet another region. And that's where I'll end this video for now. Next time, we'll talk about Pokemon White, Black 2, and X. After that, unfortunately, there will probably be a long time before the next video, but I'll talk about why that is in the next video. Thanks so much for watching, hope you enjoyed, and I hope you tune in next time.